Since the Age of Legends, the Bright Legion have held themselves to be a force of order and good, inspired by the great hero Herne the Bright. But is there more to their story? Hi, my name is Ross Watson. I'm the lead designer of Myth Tales of Legend.
And I'm Defoggi, and I'm the lead writer on Myth Tales of Legend.
So we are still doing this from our homes,
Yep.
not the awesome studio that JM has set up in Colorado Springs. Please forgive us for the production values. I've even got my Space Age headset on because this is the best thing we can do right now. But today's episode is all about the lore of myth, and we're talking about one of the organizations, possibly the biggest, or certainly one of the most well-known factions in the world of myth, which is the Bright Legion. And JM, he's written a lot about the Bright Legion. We both have. What is the Bright Legion?
So, if I can step back for a second, we've kind of talked about two of the main, like one of the main themes about myth is knowledge of the past and what do we do with it. There are forces who are like, we need to recover the knowledge because the more knowledge we have of the darkness and the things that have come before, the better prepared we are going to be for the future. But some people don't see it that way. They've seen time and time again how the darkness has used knowledge of itself to corrupt and to tear down what has been built. And so they're like, to defeat the darkness, we need to erase it. We need to burn it down to the ground and then start anew. And the Bright Legion sort of seeks to bind and control the information of the previous ages, seeing itself as the gatekeeper, the censor, if you will, of the protector of this knowledge. And we're going to get into how that plays out. But the Bright Legion sort of starts many ages ago, because it started in, or at least the last age, it started in the Age of Legend. And in the Age of Steel, right, High Haldor is built, and there's these border fortresses that are built. And during the Age of Legend, Ferren was the first one to realize, the darkness is back, and sent out the call and said, "Hey, come and help us." And most of the kingdoms were like, "Well, let's get a committee. Let's figure this out. We don't actually think the darkness is back." So the Deaf Council, which we talked about in the World of Myth video, that's where this comes from. But there were people who were inspired and who took the call seriously, and they gathered at Ferren. And these were dwarves and elves and Spriggan and humans, and they gathered at the old Orcian fortress of Ferren, and they lit the fire of the Bright Legion. They were the ones who stood against the darkness. They were the ones who gathered what knowledge they could to stand against it. And essentially, they bought time for the other four kingdoms by making themselves such a big target that the darkness had no choice but to assault it. And so the first siege of Ferren happens, and that's sort of where the Bright Legion is forged. And Herne is inexorably linked to the Bright Legion. Ross, you and I both wrote stories related to Herne for the World of Myth book that is out on DriveThruRPG, which is amazing. I got my copy. I was looking through it. It looks gorgeous. Who is Herne?
Well, Herne is the greatest and most well-known hero in the world of myth. He is kind of like a King Arthur figure. It is suspected by many that he is an avatar of the light, or was an avatar of the light, and he was cruelly struck down and betrayed in what is called the Battle of Legion, which is where this all took place. But it was his example that he's the one who's credited with founding the Bright Legion. And I mean, to be really clear, when we're talking about the Bright Legion, we're talking basically about kind of like an army, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're not. Are they really a nation? I think they're really just more. They control Ferren.
They control Ferren. They are. I think they are in the region of like Haldor, kind of this. But Haldor is broken down into, more like wandering tribes and city-states. And so Ferren is a organization that actually has their own city and they kind of spread out through the four kingdoms from there. You will find Bright Legionnaires on missions as far away as Blackwall. You will find them.
Right.
There's recruiting offices in my mind throughout the. Come on, daughter. You want to join the Bright Legion? We'll send you over to Ferren Rock. We'll train you, and you will stand as a light against the darkness. And so they are this organization that is dedicated to the preservation of light, to standing against the darkness. But in a lot of ways, they have sort of become this cold light that has a very focused, sort of focused purpose. And actually, there was a second siege of Ferren Rock that just happened recently in the world of myth. And so let's kind of, I would like to, like, if it's all right, I think that we kind of, let's talk about what the Bright Legion are like now. Like, you could have, as we talked about in the last video, with backgrounds, I would say that a connection to the Bright Legion, or maybe even a accomplishment or a goal of, hey, my accomplishment is, I'm Torvin, the Bright Legionnaire, right? I have gone through training and I have come out and I am one of the Legion's members. Or I have this goal of joining the Bright Legion, maybe one day.
That makes more sense, for the novice adventurers. Yeah. They probably wouldn't. I mean, as a GM, I would probably try to guide you towards the, you want to join rather than you have joined. But we could probably figure out a way.
Oh yeah.
To make it.
Or having a connection. Maybe you don't want to join, but you have an older brother or a mother who is part, like in the story of the Mournblade, right? It's a son and his mother, and the mother is part of the Bright Legion, and she's telling this story to her son who's defending the wall. Like, that would be a great connection and a great hook right off the bat. So they are sort of the militant arm of the light, sort of as the Four Kingdoms see it, right? Like,
well, the question that comes to my mind is, like, what kind of authority does the Bright Legion really have? Obviously, they rule Ferren Rock. Like, Ferren Rock is theirs. Their laws are in effect.
Yeah, it's like an armed military. It's like a military city camp.
Right, but if you were to go to the Three Rivers
mm-hmm.
and say, there's a Bright Legion guy there, and he's like, okay, you need to do X and you need to do Y. Probably, I would have to assume he'd have to probably be more of an advisor.
I see them as advisors, but I also see, especially like right now in the story, the Bright Legion's credit has never been higher, right? They've just broken the second siege of Ferren Rock. They've established themselves, like, they put out the call, and this time everyone listened, and they were able to, like, crush this army. And so their stock is so high that, I see advisors. I also see in, like, some of the smaller towns, if a Bright Legionnaire or a Bright Legion unit rolled in, for better or worse, they would listen to them, right? Like, they have, you're right, they have earned some respect and some obedience and things of that nature. But they're not, I just want to be really clear, they're not, like, strictly in charge of these regions. They're not ruling them or anything of that nature, but they do have influence, as you said. Now, the way they use that influence, though, that's not always for the benefit of everyone. Right. Well, let's talk about the influence in Ferren Rock to start.
Okay.
Right. So, like, as Ross said, Ferren Rock is controlled by the Bright Legion. In theory, or at least in the minds of a lot of people, Ferren Rock stands as sort of this beacon of light. The phrase, as Ferren Rock stands, probably is used as a metaphor for, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. Things will be better, right? Ferren Rock still stands. So there's this, it is sort of one of these, because it's so tied to Hearn and to Orcian and to the Age of Legends, to a lot of people, Ferren Rock and the Bright Legion take on almost this mythical status, right?
Right.
But going there, you're not going to find the opulence of Canis. You're not going to find the money that flows through, like, through Three Rivers, or even necessarily, like, the bastions and the tinker and engineering advancements of Blackwall. for all of their power, it is a constantly armed like military camp. Like they have just come through not one but two sieges. It is you might not find as much freedom as you would hope in something that in the mind of people speaks to a bastion of the light. And that kind of comes out of this last siege. There have been two factions within the Bright Legion that were sort of warring back and forth for control of, I would say, like the mission of the Bright Legion. There were those who were like, listen, we have like our traditions and we have our ways and we need to stick to that. And then there was this more radicalized group that was like, no, you don't understand. The darkness doesn't need to be defeated. It needs to be contained. It needs to be forgotten. It needs to, like, anybody associated with it will eventually fall to darkness, and we can't have anything to do with that. We're going to take this purity of the light to like a radical extreme. And the Grand Master who is keeping it all in check mysteriously is dies during the second siege of Ferren, and it allows this. Right, and if you've read the Mournblade story, you know that the wielder of the Mournblade was there for a specific purpose. And so, do we want to go into that, or do we want to just? Well,
Tritea and her story is it's related, but I think let's not go there quite for now.
Okay.
The point you're trying to make though is that the Grandmaster is no longer there.
Mm-hmm. The new Grandmaster is definitely part of this new faction.
Correct. And the Bright Legion has, we've been talking about them as if they are this mythical group of heroes. And by and large, they are good people. Mm-hmm. But to be very clear, they are not always the best people to be in charge of things. And they have some parts of the things they've done are a little bit dark.
Yeah.
They have, for example, a place called the Prison of Arthas.
Yeah.
It's one of three,
mm-hmm.
or maybe there's even more than three. But one of three known great vaults or prisons where they have locked down all these things about the darkness. Anybody who has understanding of these cosmic forces that light and darkness actually exist and are actually sentient beings, the Bright Legion's like, you cannot be allowed to spread that nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And there are basically, I mean, it runs the gamut from, full-on villains to, probably some peasant boy who was like, I just heard about this from my uncle. Well, too bad. You now live in cell 2A.
Right. And like in my mind, and we'll get to this here in a bit. But what adventure ideas would we come up with surrounding the Bright Legion? Congratulations, heroes. You have found out too much. And now the Bright Legion is after you. Well, what do you do when the forces of good come for you? Right? Now there's this tension here. So they have these vaults and these prisons that they're a great quest giver. Hey, there's this darkness thing. We need you guys to deal with it. Bring us back everything that you find. Oh, hey, that is sort of the quintessential what an organization like this is supposed to do. Even to the point like maybe, hey, we've sent a message. You guys have to hold out for 3 days until the Bright Legion arrives. Okay, we've established them as sort of and the heroes. And what I like about what Ross said is we definitely have this. The majority of the Bright Legion are these people who have dedicated their lives to fighting against the darkness. They are good people. And even the people in charge who are kind of straying into this other path, they're doing it from the best of intentions. But I could also see people who get attracted to the Bright Legion who are like, you know what the Bright Legion has? Power. Do you know what I want? That. Power. Right?
Yes. And I think to add some context to this, the idea that the light and the darkness are sentient, active forces in the world is a secret. It is very, very few beings realize this. The gods themselves more or less ignore that whole thing. They're just like, that's not important.
Right.
There are some people in the world of myth, the scholars of the Biblios author 1, the high inner circle, if you will, of the Bright Legion or another, who know this, who understand and grasp the idea that their world is actually a battlefield between two thinking creatures who have these cosmic powers, and who have destroyed or created the world in ages past. So that kind of knowledge will shake you. It will shake you to your core. And the Bright Legion says, okay, because we know this, we cannot let anyone else know this. Right. Because if other people know that the darkness is a real thing, they might go serve it.
Right. As opposed to just accidentally coming across it.
Right. So they feel that one of the best ways to fight against the darkness is to restrict any form of its corruption. And they believe that knowing of the darkness is a form of corruption. That just understanding it, seeking to understand the darkness, means that you are being corrupted. And maybe they're not entirely wrong.
Right. But I would, and I think we'll talk about the Bibliosofts in another episode, which kind of provide the foil to the Bright Legion on the side of light. Right. They both. See, I think the Bibliosofts argument would be the usual suspects argument, which is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that it didn't exist. And so the Bibliosofts are like, no, we have to get this out because the only way to fight it is to realize you're in a fight. But the Bright Legion, I agree. Like what I hope for Myth, Tales of Legend, is that we build both of these sides as very compelling sides of the same coin, so that your players go, well, which side do we? How do we navigate this tension? Because, either extreme is probably bad, but our group has to find a third path through.
And the Bright Legion, I mean, if you look at some of the adventures, I think there's one for the Avatar of Shadow. Mm-hmm. And that is a pretty, like, when you find the Avatar of Shadow, she's just escaped from, I think, or was thrown into one of the Prison of Arthas. Yeah. And it is not, you're like, oh God, like nobody wants to be here. The Bright Legion does, it is stuck in the past. Mm-hmm. And that is a big feature of its strengths and its weaknesses.
Yep.
Now, JM, I'm curious, like,
sure.
If you, knowing all this, and you lived in the world of myth, would you join the Bright Legion?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think especially because
change the system from within.
Yeah. Well, or even I just would, as a novice hero in the world of myth, as somebody who looked at the world, because that's what our heroes are. They look at the world and they're like, I have to get involved. I can't allow it to continue down this path. I think that for a lot of heroes in starting off in myth, the Bright Legion is your way to make a difference, right? Or at least you're modeling yourselves after the Bright Legion. I think that would be a great, group idea, right? Hey, we're going to start the Bright Legion chapter in Blackwall, or something to that effect. Like we want to model ourselves off of this. But I think that one of the interesting things about, like, you could run a Myth Tales of Legend game where the Bright Legion is everything that they seem to be, and they are the example that you hold up. Like, I don't think there would be anything, you would not miss out on anything. The Bright Legion is what it is for a reason, right? It's the reason that there is an Age of Heroes, right? Without the Bright Legion, the darkness would have won at the end of the Age of Legend. So, if you don't want, like, moral grayness or moral complexity to your story when it concerns the Bright Legion, that's fine. And I think there is something about the Bibliosofts where we kind of have them a little bit hiding more in the shadows as they're trying to do this, that may warn player, like, your heroes may go, wait a second, but if you're dedicated to the light, why do you hide in the shadow? The Bright Legion is out there and it's on the front lines. So I think for a GM who enjoys this sort of machinations and how terrible is wisdom when it brings no profit to the wise, like that's kind of where the tension is here with the Bright Legion. What about you? Would you join the Bright Legion? Would you be suspicious of them if you were playing a? I feel like we should each have a character that we develop over the course of these campfire videos, and like how would we put them into these situations?
Well, making this decision with perfect knowledge, like we are now,
exactly,
right? Making this decision with perfect knowledge, I would not join the Bright Legion. I think I would disagree with you on that. I think my view would be that the light has learned a lesson, and it has moved on from the idea of one central thing of light like Hearn was, and instead has spread out its light to numerous different, like it's embracing the inclusivity and diversity. And I think that's where I would want to respect Bright Legion for all it's accomplished, but it is lost its way. And I would want to show a new example and create something else.
I think that's a really good point. Right, we talked about a little bit, I think we only touched on the idea that the light, at least when you read through it the first time, it sort of feels like the darkness has got its act together. It's got an avatar of shadow, it's got all of these monsters, and there is no avatar of light. There is no, the light seems very passive and very reactive. But that's the point of the Age of Heroes, is that the light said, I tried that. It did not work. We need something different. And Ross kind of mentioned the battlefield that's going on here. And really, that goes back to the earliest ages where the light and the darkness kind of finally notice, hey, look, they're mortals. They have the same spark that we do. What do we do here? Because every time we clash together, we sort of rip apart the world and rebuild it in instants. And so they made the decision, hey, we're going to leave it to mortals to choose. And that's what's going to define this battlefield. And so I understand the Bright Legion going, yeah, but if everyone understood that choice, more people would make the wrong one. So if we can just keep the choice away from people, I think it would be really interesting with perfect knowledge to go, yeah, I joined the Bright Legion with the best of intentions. Then what do I do once I find out these other things? Do I change the system? I don't think I could play somebody who wanted to gatekeep knowledge if I knew that's what was going on. That's I love twists like that. I think of what's the one I'm thinking of? It's Shadow of the Demon Lord. I don't want to spoil anything for our listeners, but one of the religious organizations in one of the books has an amazing twist, and I'm like, what do you do if you're a paladin of this religious organization and somehow you discover the truth of what's behind it? That's the kind of character tension I want to have come up at the table.
Yeah, I think the what you can use the Bright Legion for in your campaign, we talked about a lot of different things so far. You said, hey, you could build a whole campaign around it. You could build a character around wanting to join it, wanting to change it, wanting to, I think I could see a character who wants to redeem his family name that was sullied by something. Maybe he's a relative of Tritea, and her betrayal of the Bright Legion is now a shadow on him, and he's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. I want to clear my name. That would be a great character arc. A great character arc. I want to join the Bright Legion. A great character arc would be, I want to found, like you said, we could have the context of the campaign could be, we are going to found a chapter of the Bright Legion in this little village somewhere, trade meet or whatever. Those are all great things to use them as a springboard for character stories or group stories. But I also really liked what you said about them being like they're an agency that becomes like the cavalry. You need to hold out for three days until they arrive, or a quest giver where they say, hey, we want you to do. Now, the thing that comes to my mind is that it's, unless you had a strong connection to the Bright Legion, they're not just going to go out there and hire a bunch of novice adventurers,
right? Like
willy-nilly.
Like maybe the advisor is like, listen, I don't have anyone else. I'm just here in an advisory role. But there's always, I mean, I could totally see the Bright Legion posting bounties or posting, hey, we can't be everywhere, right? That's not the point of the Bright Legion. Our concentrated forces are in these strongholds. But you know what? Grimalore's dealing a lot with crawlers, so you go out and deal with this crawler threat and bring it back to the advisor in Grimalore, and we'll definitely give you a bounty. The other idea I had, and I almost don't want to share it because I would love to run this. I don't think my players will ever do this, but you know, we have this narrative framework in Myth, Tales of Legend of you're telling the story sort of from the future, and I think it would be great to have the big reveal of the first act being, yeah, by the way, when we say you're remembering how you got to where you are at now, all of you are in the Prison of Arthas. So this whole first act has been the rise of your characters as novices, and then you get captured by the Bright Legion. And so the first act was you in prison sort of telling the story. The campfire was like the prison
Wow.
Yard, or the
I love that.
and then act 2 is, can we actually like tell the story of how we get out of this and then deal with all of this. I think that would be a great twist. So the whole time you're like, we're working for the Bright Legion, it's gonna be, oh wait, what do you mean we know too much?
Well, I think something you said earlier also that I really liked was the and I think we even brought this up like as an early thing, is that there's a lot going on after that second siege of Ferren.
Yes.
There's a lot of, the darkness has left behind. There's the TikToks. There's monsters that may have ran away from the final battle are now lurking in the hills surrounding the area. There's actually a lot to do surrounding the post second siege.
Mm-hmm.
That is it's all like a Venn diagram. It does overlap with the Bright Legion quite a bit.
Yes.
And I could see, people working around the edges of Ferren Rock and just interacting with Bright Legion, here and there, and maybe you could grow that relationship over time, and see where the player characters go. Like you maybe could even offer them two different views. You could offer them like there's maybe the old grizzled veterans, like back in the old days, we would just help people and fight against the darkness, and it was not about secrets and lies.
Right.
And then there's some young guys like, you don't understand the corruption. It's too strong. We have to save people from themselves. It's the only way, right? You can actually present the two sides through a particular NPC and see where the characters go, which way they align. You never know. So groups can always surprise you.
Right, and it's never right. Good organizations, good like realistic stories within there. No one goes, mwahaha, come and join me because I'm trying to do this thing. They're always going to present it as, listen, no, we're doing the right thing. I think it would be interesting to do a game where, say, maybe rank 1 is, as they're novices, they're starting out, they get recruited into maybe not the Bright Legion, but like, like an auxiliary group. The Bright Legion's like, hey, we've got all of this cleanup. We're going to bring you in. You're going to be attached to us here in Ferren Rock. Oh, hey, Russ, do you want to initiate into this organization? We've got this group that meets, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of important people who are part of this thing. Oh, yeah, I'll come check it out. And you do sort of, maybe it's the Bright Legion. There are certain, like, organizations or fraternities kind of within there that are like, well, we're going to take this even farther. The Bright Legion doesn't go far enough. What we need to do is we need to be doing this sort of active thing. Have you heard about, we're the Arthosians? Well, we operate out of the Citadel of Arthas. Wait, don't you mean the prison? No. Only our enemies call it the Prison of Arthas. They don't understand. I'm like, there's a lot of potential in the Bright Legion. Wow.
Yeah, there is, and conflict is what drives story.
Yes.
The conflict within the Bright Legion is actually a really great way to drive the story. But there's the exterior conflict as well, where they are the ones who are fighting against the monsters. Mm-hmm. And like we brought up when we discussed the Lucanine, sometimes the monsters don't necessarily have to be the antagonist. Sometimes they can be an element all to themselves. Now, when you're usually talking about, especially crawlers and Naga and grubbers, there are a lot of monsters who are pretty much, they're always evil and always bad, and the Bright Legion needs to push back. So that conflict is common in a lot of fantasy things. But I think the ways and we've developed the Bright Legion, the ways that Brian and Keith, who created it, came up with, there's a lot of nuance there. There's a lot of really interesting shades to look at this organization through. It's not just one big thing that's always doing the same thing all the time. They have different facets.
Yes, and I think when again we're going to talk about the Bibliosofts in another episode, but when you look at them in comparison to the Bibliosofts, right, there could be that story of the players have aligned with the Bright Legion. Well, now we're going to send them after the Bibliosofts to kind of explore how they would view this other organization. And maybe the heroes are the ones who go, guys, this other thing is coming. The two of you need to put aside this petty squabble, and remember, we both stand for the light. It's coming, and we need to deal with the Avatar of Shadow. Granted, after the fallout, who knows how this thing will break apart again. But again, I think that the conflict within the Bright Legion is internal, and we've sort of externalized it a little bit by providing this other organization that the writers of myth have created to act again, right? A foil, like the reason we use that is because like jewelers would use foil to kind of make diamonds shine brighter. You'd put it on a piece of foil to make gems look brighter, and that's the point. Like, we want this conflict to be blinding and like interesting and multifaceted. I feel like I've fallen into a lot of diamond terminology, but like that's the point, right? We want to set up all of the dominoes so they're about to fall for the GMs. And
but the Bright Legion doesn't trust everyone, and with some good reason. But there's a lot of characters you're going to interact with in the world of myth, and we'll talk about more. Like Tenebrae, she's one of what's called the Lightless. Her species is actually very different and very unusual, who have forsaken the light. And the Bright Legion is like, I don't care about anything she's done or accomplished. I don't care that she's helped you. The Bright Legion would be like, Tenebrae needs to not be here.
Yeah.
They would not be at all appreciative of Tenebrae.
We have a cell prepared for her in the prison of Arthas, right? And
Tretea, who is absolutely an antagonist, who will almost always be somebody you fight, could be a really interesting lens to look through to see how she thinks of the Bright Legion. Or Nosferatu, who is this ancient creature who's been around for thousands of years. He was even there at the Battle of Legion. You could talk to Nosferatu and be like, well, I knew her. Yeah. There could be a lot of really interesting ways to bounce the Bright Legion off of characters who the party interacts with, major beings and organizations and forces in the world, like the Tyrant on the island where the peoples and the Tavians come from. Has he heard of the Bright Legion? Does he care? Right. Maybe Tavians and peoples and monks are like, who? The Bright what? Why are we listening to these people? Right. There's a lot of interesting ways to look at and how that flows through the narrative of myth. Although
you've got the, like, if you like political intrigue, right? Anytime you have an independent power base like the Bright Legion, how do the Four Kingdoms how do the people in charge of the Four Kingdoms really feel about this standing army to the north that feels like they're entitled to go anywhere on their self-written missive of "We fight the darkness"? Yeah, we're gonna come through your borders, Three Rivers.
Yeah, this was my question earlier about authority, right? Like who. How much authority do they really have? That's probably a question that's weighing on a lot of minds in the Four Kingdoms right now. They're like, this is about this. They have the credit now. They have their cachet is at the all-time high. But is this a good thing? Could they? Surely there's at least a couple of people in the Bright Legion who are like, I will totally work with the local authorities and be friendly and kind and a diplomat. But there's got to be other ones like who, as you say, are like, no. Power is good, right? Yeah. And they'll be like, listen, I'm Bright Legion. your little country is neat and all, but no, we're in charge here.
Right. Or the person who goes, you know what would protect the Three Rivers even more? If we ruled the Three Rivers, because then all of the money could go towards our war. It would be awesome, and then we would protect the Three Rivers even better.
I'll have oversight of that.
That's right. Oof. I feel like the more we do these lore videos, the more like my GM notebook of things that I want to run in the world of myth just keeps growing.
Yeah, for real. We've added actually a great deal of interesting little facets to myth just by these conversations. One of the reasons why I love doing these videos is that not only do we get to talk to you about something that we find interesting in the world, and myth is a world that has a lot of lore to it, but it allows us to kind of develop and dig down and find little details, and we're like, okay, that would be really interesting to explore and find more. Yeah. And as JM says, I'm designing storylines and NPCs every time we have these conversations. Like, oh yeah, we now need to have a guy somewhere whose plan is this, or that their view on the Prison of Arthas is this. Just little nuggets of gold that we kind of we sieve out of these discussions.
Yeah, I think the GM hook section, when we write all of the GM possible hooks for people to myth and be like, here's just 100 ideas for campaigns in myth, they're going to come out of these videos right here.
Probably. But I think we're getting close to our time on this video. So, JM, is there anything else you want to discuss about the Bright Legion?
I think that for me, the Bright Legion, because of all of the conflict and actually because of the resources they can bring to bear, are a very interesting. They're a very interesting organization. No one has the resources that the Bright Legion has, and so players, if you're listening and watching this and you kind of are like, well, now I have more knowledge about the Bright Legion, just remember that to your heroes, they're the Bright Legion, right? They're the ones that you want riding over the hilltop, coming to save you. If you need resources, explaining to the Bright Legion advisor, hey, we're going to go do this thing. We really need support. Can you weapons or armor or something, can you just help us out? They act as a really good organization that in the world, your heroes are at least at the start are going to see like aligning with them benefits us. And
they're aspirational.
Yes.
They're aspirational. That's you look at them and say, yes, we want to be that someday.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Ross?
We've covered a lot about the Bright Legion. I think just that last question, what can we expect, from the Bright Legion? And you mentioned it, you brought it up. Like, these are the guys that give you quests, they give you resources, they are the cavalry when things are about to go bad. They are holding the line at Ferren Rock. The things you can expect from Bright Legion are generally by and large are all great things. Yeah. But you can expect, and this if nothing else about this video has sunk home, just learn, know this. You can expect there to be a lot more under the surface than what you first see.
Yes, exactly.
So that is going to bring us to, I think, the end of this Campfire chat. Once again, we're really grateful to everybody who's been following us all along. And if you have any comments or questions about anything we've discussed, please make sure you put them in the comments below, because we do read those.
We do, and we answer them.
Yes, we do. We're even going to get better about that. JM and I are talking about ways to even be more like, oh, okay, we're going to track those questions a little better. Also, Ulysses International as a channel has many other programs. They have shows about the Dark Eye. They have shows about Myth, Dawn of Heroes, shows about Aventuria, shows about
Fading Suns and Torque.
Fading Suns, Torque. Yeah, those are the last two. In fact, JM is running 2 games live if you want to catch more shows about the games that we're talking about now. So you can go back and you can look at the crew of the Oh Boy. You can go back and look at our Eternity Shards game for Torg. And right now, at this point when this video airs, we should have wrapped up or be close to wrapping up Annals of Antioch, which is our Fading Suns game. And we should be 2 sessions in, I think, to our Torg game. Like 2 actual episodes in. So you can go back and look at those. I'm sure they're fantastic. There's nothing that could possibly go wrong.
Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Right. So yeah, we really appreciate you guys going on this journey with us. And until next time,
keep telling stories.